Welcome to the Jewish Road podcast. My name is Matt Davis, and I'm here with this guy.
Yeah, I'm Ron. I'm the senior member, and we're here.
Yeah, we are. We've been a little traveling. I think one thing that we realized was ever since October 7th, it's been, as time of recording right now, it's been 54 days since October 7th. And we really kind of came out the gate with all of that. Overwhelmed, lots of requests, lots of people asking us questions.
Yeah.
A lot of articles, a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews, and it's busy. And I think we just both needed to take a break.
Yeah. It did get crazy there for a while. It's still kind of crazy. And we've got a lot of speaking and touring that we're looking at even within the next few days.
Yeah. So what we want to do is look at the season that we're in, and really, like there's this. It's an interesting. It's a weird time because we're going into what should be a joyous celebration time, and really the season that's upon us is not Christmas for us.
Nope. It's Hanukkah, and I know that there's a sense out there where everybody is now coming into that mode of joy to the world and all of that. And yet there are some very troubling times that we're looking at, and it's coming right as we're coming into the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah.
Yeah, and we've done, if you want the happier version of the Hanukkah story, we've done a few podcasts in the past, but it feels
when days were happier.
Yeah, back in the good old days. But it feels like there's a cloud over all of the stuff that we're doing. It feels like there's a cloud over life. Like I feel, I just keep looking and reading, and like it's all just awful.
Yeah, well, and obviously we're talking about the war that is taking place right now in Israel and the attack that took place against them. And I'd have to say that October 7th changed the trajectory of the whole world. Life as we know it changed.
Yeah. So we look at this, and we are going to get into. We do want to talk about Hanukkah because what I think is true about this is that this Hanukkah is different, and this Hanukkah is also no different than all of the ones before. And so I want to unpack that a little bit and to remind you, and we've talked through some of this, and we've spoken in some churches recently. We've had more time to unpack this and talk through. But there is a history leading all the way up to the birth of Jesus that really recounts its Jewish history that goes all the way back to the time of Abraham. And we said that this battle that we see before us is not so much an Israel and Hamas battle. This is a battle between good and evil.
Yeah, there's there is a physical battle taking place, but the battle that is really taking place is a spiritual battle.
And also with this, one thing that we hear, and we were just talking about this before we pressed record, but we look at this as there's Israelis, and there is a whole contingent. And I think we've been shocked at how big this contingent is worldwide of people who hate the Jewish people, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, these marches all over, even just Rockefeller Center. They're trying to light the tree in New York yesterday. Yeah. And everything had to stop because there's people who are protesting. They're not protesting the tree. They're protesting the fact that Israel is the aggressor. They're the occupier, and they are the ones committing genocide. We are in a parallel universe. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Well, and when you look at it that way, you can see what we were talking about the fact that this is a spiritual war that's taking place. It's a war between Satan and God, really. And, I think that a demonic spirit was unleashed on the whole world on October 7th. Is different than anything that any other time that has happened. And I don't know if you remember, but it was probably about 9 years ago when the Ayatollah of Iran wrote a book. And he said in 25 years, we will totally destroy Israel. So that was 9 years ago. And, when we look at October 7th, this was yet another satanic, demonic attack upon God's covenant people, and it's Satan's promise that he's going to conquer God. That's where the war is. And the Jewish people are a part of that because they're God's covenant people, and he will fulfill his promises to them. So we've got this battle kind of set before us, and we've had it all the way since Genesis.
And I think the other clarification that needs to take place is that we look at this. People say, well, what about the poor Palestinians? And we want to separate Palestinians from Hamas. That Hamas is the real aggressor. And it was interesting because there was a study that came out, a poll. The first time this poll was taken, but it was taken of Palestinians, what they thought about what was happening. And I'll put the source in the show notes here, but what they thought was happening, they looked at what Hamas did to Israel, and 76% of the Palestinians looked at this with favor towards Hamas. In fact, they said they felt even more proud. I think 78% felt more proud of their Palestinian heritage, which is we have to be
astounding.
It is astounding. We have to be careful to not say the poor Palestinians, because there is a majority of those folks that are rooting this on. In fact, the hard part, there is this like joy and sadness that coexist. That we look at that we're in a season right now where there's a ceasefire, whatever that means, for however long that goes.
Well, they already broke it once.
Yeah. So, but we have hostages that are being released, which praise God, we get to see women and children that they're being released. But make no mistake that they are holding out the men, and they're going to the very last minute they're going to be holding out the soldiers, because that is the big token at the end. We're going to drag this out. But as they're releasing them, imagine you are a mom or a kid. They put you in the back of a van. You have no idea where you're going, and they open up the doors, and they're going to release you now to the Red Cross vans. But between the Hamas van and the Red Cross van, you have to take a walk down a street, and that street is lined on both sides with Palestinians, not even waving Palestinian flags, they're waving Hamas flags. Yeah. And they're taunting and yelling slurs at these Israeli children and mothers and old women
who don't even really know where they're going yet.
Right. Yeah. They don't know if they're being led to their execution or what. But I mean, thank God they're being led to their freedom. So I want to just make sure that we understand, and we get a lot of questions about this, but it's not, we have to be very careful. I have a lot of empathy for Palestinians that are stuck. There are such things, believe it or not, as Christian Palestinians, and God bless them, and I pray that they have an amazing witness. But we have to make sure that we divide this by those who want peace and love life, and those who are evil and want death.
Yeah. And that's what the whole thing is. I mean, it's a war between those who want life, who love life. That's exactly what Moses told the children of Israel. I set before you, God said, this day, life and death.
Deuteronomy 30.
Yeah, choose life.
Choose life.
And so Israel, in all of these things, and Israel is not perfect.
No.
No. We don't agree with everything that takes place there, but they are God's covenant people, and we need to understand that it's God's covenant that is now at stake.
Yeah.
And so you have one side, you have a people who are choosing life, and obviously another side that is choosing death. I don't think Israel would ever, which is the most humanitarian military in the world, would ever do what has been done to them on October 7th.
Yeah, and I know we need to get to what we actually said we were going to talk about, but it is interesting because the mastermind who orchestrated all of this on the Hamas side, the mastermind for October 7th, 12 years ago, he was in an Israeli jail.
Right.
And what was interesting, so he not only took upon himself to learn Hebrew fluently, consume the media, but while he was in prison, I don't know if you know this, but he kept getting headaches, and they found out that he had a brain tumor.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
An Israeli doctor performed a surgery, life-saving surgery, removed that tumor from him, and totally healed him and saved his life.
Wow.
Only so that he would be released for Gilad Shalit, right? That was like 10 years ago, 2010, I think.
Yeah.
1,000 Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli soldier because we value life so much. It's almost our detriment.
Yeah, yeah. And that should speak volumes to the world and anybody listening out there. It should really speak into Christians in the church because there are some who are wavering a little back and forth on this, and so Israel released this guy who ends up masterminding the whole plan that killed 1,400 people.
Yeah. And okay.
Yeah.
Let's focus.
Yeah.
We got to focus. Because what we want to do, let's look at Hanukkah through the lens of all of this, right? So you look historically, and you have covenant made with Abraham, 2,000 years or so before the time of Jesus. And there's a covenant made finally in the 15th century BC. We have the Israelites get to come into the promised land. They have the promised land. We have a united kingdom. Right after they came out of Egypt, we have the united kingdom with King Saul and David and Solomon. And then we have the divided kingdom. But Israel is still sovereign and in charge of the land, even though it wasn't the full promised land of what God promised in Genesis 15.
Yeah, right. The full promise would have encompassed some 300,000 square miles, and the most that they ever had under David was, I think, up north, up to a part of Turkey.
A little bit. Yeah, we have some maps there. We
Yeah.
can put those up too.
So, they were a sovereign people within their land that God had given to them until a certain point.
Well, you have 722, right? We have Persians, but really
It's the Assyrian.
the Syrians. Yeah, I'm sorry, the Syrians, and then we have 586. We have Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon.
Yeah, actually, Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, there were 3 deportations of the Jews. The first one started in 605 BC, and the last one that you mentioned in 586, and with that one was the destruction of the temple and of Jerusalem, and that began actually officially the times of the Gentiles, which we are still now in. And what does that mean?
Well, we have this history of the enemy. If you're looking at this, the force of evil behind, if we can destroy the Jewish people, one thing that's prophesied from the very beginning is the Messiah would come out of the tribe of Judah from the line of David. If we can knock out the Jewish people, then the Messiah can't come. This is the thwarting that takes place going all the way back to Genesis 3. So the enemy says, if I can destroy the Jewish people, then the Messiah can't come, and then proves God a liar. So you have all of these moments throughout history where the story, the plot is trying to be turned on its head.
Right. Yeah, or if he did come, if the Messiah did come back, it would be uneventful because the people that he was supposed to fulfill the promises to are not here.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we get all the way to 167 BC. This is roughly about 160, 165 years before Jesus' first coming, before the incarnation.
Right.
And set the stage for what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, what you have here is, Alexander the Great. He passed away. He died very early in life.
Yeah, 35 years old.
Yeah, something like that. And at one point, he was on a path of destroying and overtaking all of the countries and the kingdoms of the world. He got to Jerusalem, and what was interesting is the people in Jerusalem met him as he came in, and they showed him in the scripture where it was written about him ahead of time, prophetically. And he looked at that, and he turned around and went away and didn't destroy Jerusalem at that time. But when he died, there were 4 generals that rose up, and Daniel talks about that as four heads of this beast or dragon. And out of those 4, what you really had was fighting that went on amongst these generals. You had the Seleucids in the north, which was Syria, Lebanon area, in the northern area, and the Ptolemies in the south, which is basically Egypt.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're fighting each other.
But you always have this land bridge right in the middle, and it's always Israel, right? Israel's always right in the middle of all the trade routes and everything else.
Yeah, they got to be saying, how in the world did we luck out like this?
Right.
But, they're, out of the Seleucids in the north, those four heads that rose up, there was one that rose up above all of them, and this was Antiochus the Fourth,
Yes.
and also referred to as Epiphanes. I think he called himself Epiphanes. The Jews had another name for him. They called him Epimanes, which that meant...
well, Epiphanes was like a god, manifested like a god, and Epimanes was more like a madman.
The madman, Antiochus the madman.
And really the quest is we're going to Hellenize the world. We're going to make everybody Greek. And what that meant for the Jewish people is you can no longer be Jewish.
Right.
And so this is the sweeping trend that's going throughout.
And what is interesting about this is, the Jewish people are not, at this point in time, they're not Torah driven. They're not, following all of this. And they probably would be fine if someone didn't say to them, you can't be Jewish anymore. And all of a sudden, the stubbornness that was there, kicks into the other gear and says, what do you mean we can't be Jewish? And it creates this war that's going to take place between a band of Jews who are going to defend their Jewishness and their temple and so on.
Well, and there was even a split, though, amongst the Jewish people. Many gave in and just said, fine, we'll be Hellenists, right? And we're going to, this Greek way of life is fine. But you do have this band, and everything comes to a head in 167, and it's in a little town called Modin.
Modin, yeah.
And Modin actually exists.
Still there. Yeah.
It's a town. So I just remember every time we left Jerusalem and we'd go on our way up to Tel Aviv to the airport, you pass Modin about halfway in. Actually, today, it's growing like crazy. We actually have friends that just moved from Jerusalem to get out of the busy, crazy city, and they're going 20 minutes up the road. It's an easy train ride, and they're right there in Modin. But in this place, there was a confrontation that really was the start of a revolt, what we call the Maccabean revolt.
Yeah, and that was, the forces of Antiochus Epiphanes put a halt to everything Jewish that they could practice. No more circumcision, no more bar mitzvahs, no more keeping the Sabbath, no more Torah, none of those things. And so there was a group led by a man named Judas Maccabeus, Judas Maccabee. And
but even before that, they come into town, and you have the high priest there, and his name's Mattathias. Just like my name.
Yeah,
Mattathias.
Mattatyahu.
He's kind of a hero in the story. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but he comes in, and really they say, "Hey, we want you to make a sacrifice to our Greek gods." And there was actually a Jew there who said, "I'm willing to do that."
Yeah,
and
that did not bode well for him.
No, and so Mattathias says, "You cannot do that." Mattathias kills that man, and then kills the soldier that was commanding this to happen. And really, what that does is it starts a revolt. And Mattathias has 5 sons, and this Maccabee. The word Maccabee means hammer. And really, even today, you have the Maccabee Games. It's really kind of a very cool sports term, and still very much around, but it means you want to hit like a hammer. And that's really what they did over the course of 3 years. They continued to push this tiny little guerrilla tribe, and you can read the story, but they kept pushing back and pushing back until they finally were successful 3 years later.
Yeah. And so they took the temple back, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And so here's actually a little bit of a snippet. If you want to read the story of Hanukkah, historically, it's in First Maccabees. Well, there's 5 books of Maccabees, but it gets weirder as it goes along. But
it's part of the apocryphal collection of books, so it's not really scripture, but Maccabees has always been looked at as a pretty accurate historical record.
That's right. And so one of the things that happens is Antiochus and the armies, they go to the temple in Jerusalem and they desecrate it. They kill a pig, they sacrifice a pig, they put blood all over the altar, which is a desecration right there on the altar. And so after the war and the battle is done, then they go through. This is First Maccabees, chapter 4, verse 36. And it says, Then Judas and his brothers said, See, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army, they assembled, they went up to Mount Zion, and there they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, and the gates burned. And in the courts, they saw bushes sprung up as in a thicket, or as on one of the mountains. And they also saw the chamber of the priests in ruins. And their response was they tore their clothes, they mourned with great lamentation, they sprinkled themselves with ashes, fell face down on the ground, and they blew signal trumpets, and they cried out to heaven. So this is a sad moment that they see what has happened to this temple that was there, the presence of God.
Yeah, and what we said in the beginning, this holiday that ends up being commemorated as a result of this, we look at this and we see that there is nothing new in the history of Israel.
That's right. So once again, we have a people group that is trying and demonically motivated, but trying to wipe out the Jewish people.
Right.
And the beauty is that they were not successful. We'll get to that in a second. But what's interesting is that they wanted to cleanse and rededicate the temple. And it says that they deliberated about what to do about the altar of burnt offering, which had been profaned. And they thought it was best to tear it down so that it would not be a lasting shame to them that the nations had defiled. I even think about the police station in Sderot. It was totally, there was a massacre that took place in the police station there on October 7th. And they just said, we're going to wipe it out. They just leveled the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing left. And so it says, so they tore down the altar and they stored the stones. I think this is interesting. They stored the stones in a convenient place on the Temple Hill until a prophet should come to tell them what to do with them. I think that they realized even then that there was not a prophet that was speaking to them, that this is a part of Jewish history where God is on the move, but the people are not always listening, that God is moving despite that. And so they put these stones off to the side until God is going to tell them, and then they rebuild the altar, and now they go through the process of rededicating this temple.
Yeah. And so the story is, you want to talk about the story about the lighting and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, I think it says it right here. It says early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month. It's this Hebrew month called
Kislev.
There you go. It says they rose, they offered sacrifice as the law directs, and new altar. And it says at the very season, on the very day that the nations had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals and clarinets and accordions. And all
accordions. Thank you very much.
There you go. And all the people fell on their faces and they worshiped and they blessed heaven who had prospered them. But they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings, and they offered a sacrifice of well-being. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers. There was great joy, and the disgrace brought up by the nations was removed. And so it says, Judas and all of his brothers, all the assembly of Israel, determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning the 25th day of the month of Kislev.
Uh-huh.
And that is on the calendar. It's this next week. It starts December 7th, I think, this year.
Yeah, the evening of December 7th. Yeah. And the legend is that they had enough oil for one day, to burn for 1 day, because it had to go through certain rituals of purity and so on and so forth, to be kosher.
And the oil was there to light the Ner Tamid in the temple. So
right.
The Ner Tamid is
the eternal light.
Eternal light. So they go back as they're rededicating. They're basically turning the electricity back on. They cleaned everything up. Now they're lighting the temple, getting everything back to how it was. And they go to light this Ner Tamid, and there's not enough oil. There's enough oil there for 1 day is how the legend goes.
Yeah, yeah. And so miraculously, that oil lasted for 8 days until they could make new oil that was purified and could be used. And so That's how we get the 8 days of Hanukkah.
So we have 8 days for that, but also we have the 8 days that's prescribed here in Maccabees. But it's also, if you ever see Jewish people, there's two things that we eat. Everything is deep fried in oil, which makes everything very healthy for us. It's great. No heart attacks or anything.
I love it.
You love it. But we have potato latkes, which are glorified hash browns. And then we also have sufganiyot, which are donuts, usually jelly-filled. And it's just to remember the oil there.
Oil.
But that's not the real miracle.
No.
What's the real miracle?
Oh, my gosh. Well, the real miracle, I mean, they talk about the fact that it's the rededication of the temple. Obviously, God intervened and saved his people once again. He is always doing that because we need to understand that he is going to protect his covenant. He's going to protect his covenant people. And so he does this once again. But I think, and so we celebrate, Hanukkah as God delivering and rededicating the temple.
And he preserved his people so that about 160 years later, the Messiah would be born from the tribe of Judah, from the line of David, as was prophesied.
Yeah. And so we have this Jewish Messiah at one point, and John refers to this in John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 22. He refers to the fact that it was the Feast of Dedication at Jerusalem.
So you're saying that Jesus celebrated the Feast of Dedication. Jesus celebrated Hanukkah.
He celebrated Hanukkah.
Yeah.
He's there, and he had a purpose in all of this. Says it was winter, and Yeshua was walking in the temple in Solomon's porch.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great thing. And so what is interesting here, the chapters prior to this in the Gospel of John are talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, and they're talking about Sukkot, and it's an 8-day festival, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's not really an accident that after discussing Sukkot, John then relates the life of Messiah to the next feast.
Oh.
And here it is 3 months later, and Yeshua is here. He's showing up for Hanukkah, and it's another 8-day feast. And, during Sukkot, Yeshua declared himself to be what? To be the light of the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This was in John chapter 8. And that picked up 3 months later. He made the statements about himself at the Feast of Hanukkah once again. And so when we're looking at what is taking place here, and Yeshua is saying, I am the light of the world, and he comes in, and here we have the festival of lights here, Hanukkah. He went to Jerusalem for the purpose of observing that feast, so that he was walking in the part of the temple compound that we just said was Solomon's porch, and while he was in the compound, the people surrounded him. And it's interesting, as we read in John chapter 10, it says, so the Jews gathered around him and said to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? They charged him with obscurity in this whole thing. They're saying it's not clear concerning your identity. Listen, are you the Messiah or are you not the Messiah?
Right.
And so they're saying, how long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you're the Messiah, tell us plainly. And Yeshua answers them, and he says, I told you with words, and I told you with my works. I already told you. He says, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do, there are the works in my Father's name, bear witness about me. But you do not believe because you are not part of my flock. Wow.
And we have the shepherd passages after that.
Yeah. The sheep hear my voice. He also
Right.
said, I am the good shepherd. There's about 7 I ams in the Gospel of John here. I am the bread of life. I am, I'm the light of the world.
Living water, bread of,
Yeah. And so he says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. He says, I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. And boy, that lights a stick of dynamite with these people. And you know what he's really saying? He's when he's saying, my Father and I are one, he's making a reference, really, if you think about it, back to the Shema. Because, what does the Shema say? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, echad. But it's a compound one. It's not an absolute singular one. And so what he is saying, if God is one and Yeshua is one with God, then he is therefore God himself. And he's holding this out at the Feast of Dedication, relating the whole thing back to the 8 days and the light of the world and so on and so forth.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel better?
Oh, yeah. Well,
you just need to get it out. I was just going to sit back and listen a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and we're talking about the fact that, there's an attack taking place on God's covenant people. And, we can't ignore October 7th. And we go back to that and we can see that there is a demonic spirit that's unleashed, and it's different than any of the other attacks that have taken place in terms of its purpose and the preparation. It's just a frontal attack to destroy Israel. And so we are with the understanding. We have the understanding that Yeshua is the Messiah. He's the light of the world. But we're going back to this, the remembrance of this holiday of Hanukkah, and we're seeing a page of history has really been turned here, and I don't think we're going back.
No. If we're going to wrap this, what I think is important for us to realize, if we just very, very quickly unwrapped this time from Abraham coming all the way up to the Messiah, that there's always been this element that has tried to remove and get rid of the Jewish people, because if the enemy can get rid of the Jewish people, he can remove the faithfulness and the covenant that God has with his people. That's how we know that we're not going away. I don't know how God is going to do this in the end, but what's really important is that since the time of Yeshua's coming, the incarnation, since Jesus was born, died, and then rose again, and then ascended to the right hand of the Father, we've had another about 2,000 years that's taken place. And all throughout, we can take from that moment when Jesus was ascended back into heaven, from that time until right now, we have the same attempts that have come against the Jewish people. There's been a constant attack. And like we've said earlier, the enemy just reloads his hatred into another people to hate the Jewish people. And all of this is in preparation for, and I know that what we're leaning for or towards in this season is the incarnation, Jesus and his birth. And while I think it's incredibly important and fulfilled all kinds of things, what Jesus was concerned about while he was here on earth, he didn't keep going back to, let's celebrate my birthday. He said, I'm coming back again.
Right.
And I want you to know that there will be elements that are going to try to subvert that plan also. And if we don't recognize what has happened on October 7th as an enemy's plan to eradicate the Jewish people, we're missing the plot altogether.
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting because we're, as you said, we're entering this season of the birth of the Messiah. We have the baby in the manger. And I think a lot of people would be very happy to keep him as the baby in the manger.
Ooh, that's good.
And what we need to come to is a realization of where we are in history, because I believe that we're in the last days right now. all of this fighting and warring, and regardless of how brutal and you can't even find words to describe it. No matter how bad it is, it would just be more fighting among the nations and more wars and more death and so on, if not for one fact. And the one fact is that in 1948 Israel was back in the land.
Yeah.
And so the fact that they are back in the land, we see all of these things that are taking place as part of the birth pangs that Yeshua talked about.
Yeah.
And,
he says you'll know the season.
Not only did he talk about it, the rabbis talked about it.
That's right.
You know that in the Talmud, it talks about when you see nation rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom, be ready for the footsteps of the Messiah.
That's right.
I mean, it's amazing. And so even the rabbis are looking for it. But what's happening now is that these birth pangs are getting closer and closer, and they're more intense and more intense. And that's why I say I think, we've turned a page in history, and I don't think we're going back. We can't go back, because Israel in the land was the super sign that, the Lord is setting the stage for his second coming. And so these things that are taking place, I mean, it's happening, is, given our time and place in history, it sure seems that we are very close to the end of the age and the return of the Lord.
And not only should we be the ones that are looking towards this, but guess who else is looking towards the end of days? Every Muslim on the face of the earth. If you look at, maybe we need to, let's get Joel Rosenberg on here, and we'll talk about this. But the eschatology, the end times and the beliefs of the Muslim community line up exactly with our end times theology.
Yeah.
Except it's just reversed.
They have their Mahdi,
yes,
which is their Islamic Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get into that.
That's
discipline.
a whole nother thing all by itself.
Discipline. That's what we need. We need lots of verbal discipline.
Well,
right now.
So, bottom line, it's not just another outbreak of fighting. It would be, but for the fact that Israel's back in the land, and that changes everything that happens. And our message, the message that we want to get out there, is it's a message to the church, it's a message to Israel, and it's a message to the whole world. Given what you're seeing, what we're talking about here, wake up.
Yeah. We have stories, and we are going to stop here, but it's there are stories of Israeli soldiers that there's a transformation that is beginning. Not that Jewish people are coming to Jesus, although there has been a slow progression of that, but there are Jewish people that are coming to God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And our prayer is that they not only find the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but that they remember, or that they would know that he sent his son, the Messiah who's already come, but that they would know that he's coming again.
Yeah.
So there is movement, and there's things to be hopeful for. But I don't know if you've ever, growing up listening to all these stories, I used to think, man, I wonder what it would have been like to grow up during the times of the Bible. Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, make no mistake that right now we are living in biblical times.
Yeah.
I'm not calling any dates. I'm not going to say this is when everything's going to happen. But what we are experiencing and what we are seeing take place on a world stage, we are living in biblical times. And if you want to hear the happier version of this story, then go back to the other ones that we did a couple of years ago. Yeah. But this is, it's just everything's coming together.
Yeah, we always used to talk about the signs of the times, but rather than that, now we're talking about the time of the signs.
Oh, I see what you did there.
And it's
brilliant. How do you have so many of those things? It's unbelievable.
It's just the trivia that floats around my head.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's this is the truth, and we are at the end of the age. I had something to say about what you had just said, And
now it's gone.
I can't remember what I was going to say, and I can't remember what you said.
That's like a double forget. Well, I think that's a great place to stop, and maybe it'll come back, and we'll put it on the next podcast. A couple things I want you to hear real quick. This is our fourth goodbye by now, right? We say that.
It's a Jewish goodbye.
It's a Jewish goodbye.
The Jews say goodbye, and they never leave.
That's right. So for our fourth goodbye, Hanukkah is coming, and you can celebrate Hanukkah even if you're a Christian in your Christian home. And we actually did something to help you out with this. If you go to our website right now, there's a bar going across the top, and it'll say click here, and it'll be for Hanukkah. But celebrating Hanukkah in your Jewish home, we will take you through. You'll get a shopping list. You'll get recipes. You'll get games. You'll get videos of us every single day so that you can celebrate for 8 nights. The Hanukkah story.
You said in your Jewish home. You meant in your Christian home.
Oh, in your Christian home. Yeah. I said Jewish home?
Yeah.
Boy, we're both forgetting things now. This is bad. We need one of us to be good at at least one in the time that we're doing this.
That's why I picked up the bar and
So here we go. Go to the website and you can sign up for that, and then that'll give you access to see all of that stuff that we have going on with Hanukkah. And then we're coming to year end, and we want you to know that we are so thankful. One of the things that we've been doing over the last couple weeks, and we have a lot more coming in the next couple weeks, but we're sharing the message that we feel that God has put us here for a reason. We're actually just figuring this out. Just kidding.
I think October 7th changed the trajectory of where we were in terms of the Jewish road to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still in the 2-act play.
Absolutely.
It's very pertinent.
And the 2-act play was all about how do we make sure that we're telling the whole story.
Right.
And what we see going on in the world is the whole story is not being told. Yeah. We have the greatest story ever told, and it's only being half told.
Yeah.
And what you hear in the media, what you hear in the news, you're not getting the full story. Yeah. And so we want to be able to do that. For such a time as this, we feel an urgency for that.
Yeah. I've got
I don't know what you're doing.
Something's coming up. I mean, it just occurred to me. Can I say something?
Yeah, I give you permission.
Yeah. Oh boy,
that means I'm in charge, I guess, huh?
I became a believer 48 years ago, and the whole thing about becoming a believer 48 years ago was proving an apologetic that Jesus is the Messiah. And I remember one of the people who had a great influence was Hal Lindsey and his book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and so on. But from what we were just talking about, the trajectory has changed. We don't want to divorce ourselves from that, apologetic of the Messiah having come the first time, but we see a new horizon here, and we need to talk about the fact that not only did he come once, but he's coming back. That's what I was going to say.
All right. For our fifth goodbye.
Yeah.
We want to say thank you. And honestly, we can't do this without you, but we really feel compelled that this needs to take up more of our time. And it is taking more of our time. But if you feel led that the Jewish Road is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is crowdfunded from generous people who are part of our tribe from all over the world. And the Lord has just absolutely surprised us, not only with incredible gifts and the love that you've all poured out, but even from the people who we least expected. And we're so thankful for each and every one of you. We're thankful to be able to be conduits, to be able to send funds and support to the people on the ground in Israel so that we might give life. We are a people who choose life. We say l'chaim. Every time we take our wine glasses, we clink them together and we say l'chaim, to life. And so we not only want to be people who bring life, but our Jewish people are missing the greatest life possible, and that's eternal life, and that is only found in Messiah Yeshua. So thank you for bearing with us. We have a lot to get out, and apparently there's still more once you remember those other couple things.
Yeah.
We'll have to go back and
we'll work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the meantime, we say pertinent now as much and maybe even more than ever that we pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
That's right. So thank you for listening, and shalom.